All right, welcome back. My name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this video, we're going to take a look at research hypotheses and also research objectives. And we're going to compare these with research questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So hypotheses, objectives, and comparing these two also with research questions. Now, when we're talking about hypotheses in quantitative research, we are trying to explain relationships between two or more variables, or you could say two or more groups. And hypotheses are really for statistical testing. So we're not really going to focus on the statistical side of research in these videos, but you need to be aware of that. And essentially, there are two types of hypotheses. There are null hypotheses and there are alternative hypotheses. And again, this is based much more on a background in statistics rather than the hypotheses you might remember from like your science class as an example. So I have two examples of a null hypothesis on this screen. And so the first one you can read right here. There is no difference. That means there's no relationship. Null means nothing. That's what it means right here. Null means nothing. So there is no difference in the means of academic dishonesty between men and women at university during the 2022-2023 school year. So you can see I have my two groups right here, men and women. I have my variable that I'm measuring, academic dishonesty. And so everything is set up for what I want to try to test here. So the real purpose behind research questions, hypotheses, and objectives is they help to frame and structure how you're going to actually go about building your methodology. They give you insights into the type of statistical tests and tools you might want to use to actually produce the answers for your research questions. That's how it works out. Now, here's our second one. There is no relationship between the means of academic dishonesty. Here's my variable right here. And self-confidence, my other variable, among university students, sorry about the typo, during the 2022-2023 school year. So again, you can see now I'm looking at two different variables. I'm looking at academic dishonesty and I'm looking at self-confidence in the second one. So again, this is how you structure a hypothesis that can be tested statistically when you're doing quantitative research. Now the alternative hypothesis, and if you notice carefully, here there is no difference, but now with alternative, there is a difference. That's the primary difference, if you will, no pun intended, between a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. With the null, we are claiming there is no difference. We're claiming that there is no relationship or whatever between whatever two groups or variables we're testing, while with the alternative, we're saying there is a relationship. And so if you look at the example, there is a difference. This is the key word here, a difference, not there is no difference, but a difference. In the means, this is how we're going to measure things, of academic dishonesty. This is our variable between men and women. This is our group 1. This is our group 2 at university during the 2022-2023 school year. So now we're saying there is a difference. All right. Now we test the null hypothesis. And again, I don't want to get into the statistical aspects of it, but whether or not, depending on the results, we can claim that this might be one other way to explain what we got. In other words, it's an alternative. It's one of many alternatives. Let's take a look at the second one. There is a relationship. All right. So look at a relationship in the means of academic dishonesty and self-confidence among university students during the 2022-2023 school year. So again, everything is lining up. And I need to repeat this because it's very, very important. Your hypotheses, your research questions, however you want to phrase these things you want to get answers to, they help to shape the tools you use in your actual statistical analysis. When you're trying to crunch the numbers, the research questions, hypotheses, objectives give you a hint as to how you can go about answering that question. This is very, very important because sometimes people have really interesting, really intriguing research questions, but you can't figure out exactly how to answer them. And so you have to be careful and make sure you follow, some sort of steps and process so that you're communicating what you want clearly. If it's clear, somebody who is strong with numbers can help you to determine how to answer those questions. But if it's unclear, there's not a whole lot of help in terms of being able to support you to get your answers. All right, let's move to objectives. Now, this is kind of my definition. Objectives are they're like a promise of what you will do in a paper. All right, so let's take a look at this one. Let's take a look at the example here. To determine if there is a difference or a relationship in the means of academic dishonesty between men and women at university during the 2022-2023 school year. So the key here is this little infinitive phrase at the beginning. To determine, to examine, to discuss, to share, to assess. You're always going to probably find those with objectives. They always start with what this is called in English an infinitive phrase. You know, two plus a verb, two plus a verb, two plus a verb. That's what's going to be happening most of the time here. Now, again, can you write objectives a different way? Yes, we're not going to deny that. I'm sure you can find lots of other ways to do it. But this, again, based on experience from having done this before, is an example of something that many people consider to be clear and that they can follow what's going on here. And so maybe as you're watching these examples, you're starting to see some similarities between hypotheses and objectives. And I'm going to address that soon, like in this slide right here. So here we have an example of a research question, a hypothesis, and an objective, and they're all dealing with the same variable. They're all dealing with the same groups. And I want you to notice that there are just three different ways to write the same thing. And that's important because you will have advisors who want questions. You will have advisors who want hypotheses. You will have advisors who want objectives. You'll have editors of journals who want one of these. You'll have editors who want both. And really what's happening is that it's three different ways of communicating the same idea. And sometimes I think people don't notice that. And so again, determining which tool to use, it really depends on who you're working with and what is your audience. Some journals want questions, some journals want hypotheses, whatever. Sometimes when you write a dissertation, you'll have questions and hypotheses and objectives in the same paper. It doesn't matter. You have to adjust your writing style to the audience. That's really, really important. So let's look at the research question. Is there a difference or is there a relationship in the means of academic dishonesty between men and women at university during the 2022-2023 school year? Is there a difference? All right, that's what we're looking for. Relationship doesn't really apply here. But notice here, we have a question mark at the end. That's it. Now let's take a look at hypotheses. I'm right over here now. There is no difference or there is no relationship in the means of academic dishonesty between men and women at university during the 2022-2023 school year. So again, this is a null hypothesis. I'm saying there's no difference in the means. There's no relationship in the means. In other words, gender does not have an influence on people's academic mean. That's my hypothesis. And so again, I'm dealing with the same ideals. I have academic dishonesty right here. I have it right here. I'm using means. I have means right here. I have my two groups, men and women. I have men and women. It's all the same. It's just like, which one's better? It all depends on who you're writing for. Let's take a look at objective. To determine if there is a difference in the means of academic dishonesty between men and women at university during the 2022-2023 school year. Again, we got means here. We got academic dishonesty. We got men. We got women. It's all the same. So just to reiterate or to repeat my point, which tool you use depends on the audience you are writing for. Some people are going to say if you don't have hypotheses, your paper is wrong. Your paper is incomplete. There's really no point to arguing with them. It's better to find a way to appease them and just give them what they expect. Some people will say if your paper does not have research questions, it is wrong. Again, there's no point arguing with them. It's better to appease them and give them what they want because maybe they're not familiar with how these are very similar terms and how you can capture them in different ways. All right, moving on now. So there's a few things I need to cover that maybe are not clear. If you remember in other videos, we talked about different types of research questions: descriptive, comparison, and relationship. Descriptive questions cannot be converted to hypotheses. You cannot have a hypothesis for a descriptive question. All right. And so and the reason for that is because There's no relationships that need to be explained. There's no comparisons being made between groups. So here's an example of a descriptive question right here. What is the average height of men at university? Okay, so you can see that right here, there's nothing where you have to kind of make like an educated guess. There's no relationships to be tested. There's no comparison between groups. So there's no need for any kind of hypothesis for this particular situation. It's not appropriate. Okay. However, one other point I need to make is that if you're starting with objectives, which there's nothing wrong with that, objectives can be converted to research questions and they can be converted to hypotheses. However, if the objective is dealing with descriptive stuff, like to determine the average height of men at university, you can't convert that. Anything that has to do with descriptive cannot be converted to a hypothesis. Hypotheses involve things that are looking at comparisons between groups and or relationships between variables. That is how it works. So to wrap things up, in this particular video, we took a look at trying to understand hypotheses. Hypotheses in quantitative research are trying to look at comparisons between groups and or relationships between variables. And you have two types. You have null and you have the alternative. Now, again, this is not quite from what you learned doing your science experiments in high school or whatever, but we're limiting the definition to the discipline or the field that we're addressing right now. We also learned about how to, what objectives are for. Objectives are just like promises that you make about things you're going to address in your research paper. And they start with that infinitive phrase most of the time, not always. And it's just a different way of trying to capture your hypotheses. And like I already mentioned a few minutes ago, research questions, hypotheses, and objectives, they're all different tools for basically trying to explain to the reader what answers you are looking for. Neither of these three different choices are superior to the other. Which one you use or which combination that you use really depends on the audience and the expectations they have for how research should be conducted. So, my name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Thank you so much for listening and take care.